On the summer of 430 BCE, ships from distant lands slipped into the bustling harbor of Piraeus, unloading grain, soldiers, and unseen death. Within days, the first whispers of a mysterious disease spread through cramped dockside quarters, and the city's famed long walls began to seal in a silent threat. Stay with this investigation as the plague turns from a familiar mystery into an evidence trail we can actually test. Citizens crowded into narrow aisles, families huddled in communal shelters, and the air grew heavy with coughs and fever. The plague that broke Athens would soon claim a third of its people, eroding the very fabric of a civilization celebrated for philosophy and art. If you find this story compelling, consider supporting our deep dive series. As we trace the pathogen's path, we ask, how could a strategy meant to protect become a lethal incubator? The answer lies within the walls of Athens itself. In 430 BCE, the Athenian port of Piraeus thrummed with activity as grain ships from the Black Sea and Egypt docked alongside war galleys. Merchants shouted prices, sailors unloaded amphorae, and soldiers marched through the crowded piers unaware that among the cargo lay a virulent disease. Thucydides, the contemporary historian, noted that the first sick men fell ill in the marketplace, and soon the sickness spread to the dockyards. The pathogen, its exact nature still debated, found fertile ground in the tightly packed lodging of sailors and laborers, where poor sanitation and close contact accelerated transmission. Within weeks, feverish cries echoed through the narrow streets, and physicians described a rash of red pustules that turned skin to ash. The disease did not discriminate. Soldiers, sailors, and civilians alike succumbed, their bodies piled in makeshift graves beside the harbor walls. Contemporary accounts speak of a stench so foul that even the sea breezes seemed poisoned, and that the once lively market stalls fell silent as families fled the contagion. This initial wave set the stage for a crisis that would soon engulf the entire city, turning a thriving commercial hub into the epicenter of a catastrophe that broke Athens. The rapid proliferation was aided by Athens' reliance on the Long Walls, which connected the city to its port and forced the population to concentrate in a narrow corridor. As the disease moved inland, it encountered dense neighborhoods of the lower city, where families lived in cramped mud brick houses. Water sources became contaminated, and limited medical knowledge offered little relief. Thucydides recorded that the sick experienced a high fever, severe head pain, and a sudden fatal collapse. Modern scholars have proposed candidates ranging from typhus to viral hemorrhagic fevers, yet DNA analysis of burial sites has yet to provide a definitive answer. The mystery endures, but impact was unmistakable. The plague's arrival through Piraeus marked the beginning of a demographic collapse that would strip Athens of its intellectual vigor and military strength. In the spring of 429 BCE, the plague reached the heart of Athenian leadership. Pericles, the statesman whose oratory had guided the city through the first decade of the Peloponnesian War, fell ill while delivering a funeral speech for the war dead. Thucydides records his trembling voice and the sudden pallor that overtook him, describing how the great commander collapsed on the altar, his breath shallow, his mind dimmed. Within days, the revered leader died, leaving a vacuum that fractured the polis. The loss reverberated through the army. Troops stationed on the walls received conflicting orders, and morale plummeted as soldiers feared both the enemy and the invisible killer at home. Share your thoughts on how war and disease intertwine in the comments. The political chaos compounded the health crisis. Burial practices became hasty, public gatherings ceased, and the traditional civic rituals that once reinforced unity dissolved as rival factions vied for power. Resources were diverted from medical aid to fortifications, further weakening the city's ability to respond. By the end of 428 BCE, Athens struggled to field coherent strategies, its once unified voice reduced to a chorus of desperate pleas. The death of Pericles thus marked not only the loss of a charismatic leader, but also the unraveling of the political framework that had sustained Athenian dominance for generations. The ensuing power struggle saw Cleon rise, urging harsher measures against Sparta while promising relief from the disease. His aggressive policies strained depleted supplies and fueled dissent in poorer districts already bearing the epidemic's weight. Meanwhile, Athenian navy, once the empire's pride, found its crews thinned and ships' unattended morale eroded by funeral pyres along the dock. Historians note that this mix of military overextension and internal decay hastened Athens' surrender in 404 BCE. Thus, the plague acted as a catalyst, reshaping the democracy into fractured states scrambling for survival. The Long Walls, stretching 20 kilometers from the city to the safe harbor of Piraeus, were Athens' greatest defensive achievement. Yet in the summer of 430 BCE, they became a conduit for contagion. Tens of thousands of refugees fled the countryside, crowding the narrow corridors, market stalls, and communal granaries that lined the stone passageways. Overcrowding amplified the disease's transmission rate, bodies lay in the streets, and the usual civic rituals of washing and incense could not keep pace with the mounting death toll. By 427 BCE a second, more virulent waves surged through the cramped shelters, striking soldiers still stationed on the walls, and the few remaining craftsmen who kept the city's ships afloat. Archaeological excavations have uncovered mass burial pits near the walls, their contents bearing signs of rapid simultaneous death. Thucydides recorded the scene with stark clarity. The dead lay in piles, the living fled in terror, and the city's heart ceased to beat. Modern scholars have applied DNA sequencing to teeth recovered from these pits, yet the pathogen remains unidentified. Candidates range from typhus and typhoid fever to viral hemorrhagic fevers. The ambiguity fuels ongoing debate, but the impact is undeniable. The plague accelerated the erosion of Athens' military manpower, depleted its tax base, and shattered the morale that had once made the city an intellectual beacon. The convergence of siege strategy and disease created a feedback loop. Weakened defenses invited Spartan raids, which in turn forced more citizens into the walls, further amplifying infection. By the war's end, the once vibrant polis had lost roughly one-third of its inhabitants, a demographic collapse that extinguished the golden era of philosophy, drama, and democratic experimentation. The tragedy of Athens serves as a stark reminder that the tools of protection can become instruments of ruin when they trap a population inside a living tomb. Future generations would study this calamity, learning that planning and military policy must consider health impacts lest civilization be undone by unseen microbes. By the war's end in 404 BCE, Athens lay in ruins, its population decimated and its democratic institutions shattered. The plague that broke Athens erased the intellectual vigor that had birthed tragedy, philosophy, and the foundations of Western thought. Scholars still debate the pathogen, yet the lesson is clear. Strategies that crowd civilians can turn fortifications into tombs. Modern pandemics echo this ancient tragedy, reminding us that public health must guide military and civic planning alike. Its legacy still haunts scholars seeking lessons for future crises. Explore further episodes to see how ancient crises echo today. Subscribe to keep exploring the plague and stay curious about what the evidence is still hiding.